Well, good evening, everyone. Welcome to our second monthly event for the mentored pairs for the 2020-2021 year. These monthly events for pairs are new this year, and we hope you find them valuable, and your feedback is welcome. I'm Denny Branca. I'm a CSE Electrical Engineering alum from a while ago. I serve on the Student Engagement Committee of the CSE Alumni Board, which helps run the mentor program. I want to first thank the mentors tonight for volunteering their time to help the students. And I want to congratulate you students who leverage forums like this to better yourselves. Technical professionals can reach their potential by practicing some of these key soft skills, such as informational interviews. So as I close, I just want to wish everyone a great holiday season. And I wish our students the best of luck in your upcoming finals. And I hope you all have fun tonight in this forum. Thanks very much.
All right, thanks so much, Denny, and welcome everyone. I want to first start us off with a few housekeeping notes. So I am Andrea Hansen. I am the Assistant Director of Events and Alumni Relations for the college. So first of all, this is a Zoom meeting, so you do have access to your video and microphone. However, we do ask that you stay muted during the presentation. There will be time for discussion following the presentation. We will be using breakout rooms today. If you join from a Zoom room, you will not be able to participate in the breakout rooms. So we ask that you leave the meeting and rejoin from the email, the link in the email that you got today. If you called in, that's fine. We just ask that you, in the chat, let us know who you are for your phone number so we can get you into the right breakout room. Finally, in the confirmation email that you received for today's event, there were a couple of links that I want to just make sure you're aware of. One is for the breakout discussion questions for today's event. If you haven't already, I suggest that you go ahead and open that document. When we are in breakout rooms, you won't be able to see the questions. The second link is for a guide that we created for informational interviews. This is more of a future reference document. It includes a lot of the tips that we'll cover today, along with some sample language for requesting an informational interview and some sample language, or excuse me, some sample questions for informational interviews. This link will be shared again during the follow-up email you'll get, as well as on our website. And again, we are recording today's event, but breakout room discussions will not be recorded. So I want to quickly run through the agenda for today's event. We're going to start off with a conversation on the value of informational interviews from our featured guests, Claire and Adam. Then we'll move into the breakout rooms for some small group discussion. If your partner is here today, you will be paired together in a breakout room. We'll have about 20 minutes for breakout room discussions. Then we'll bring everyone back for some follow-up and to share as a large group. And then we'll share some upcoming events. Again, we should be done by 6 p.m. All right, I'd like to now introduce our featured guests. So Claire Yang, oops, sorry, I went too far. There we go. Claire Yang is a senior studying computer science and psychology with interests in artificial intelligence and service design. This is her second year of participating in the CSE Mentor program. And Adam Fitzgerald is a senior R&D engineer in the peripheral vascular group at Medtronic. He has worked there for 11 years across multiple roles in operations, manufacturing, and R&D. Adam graduated from CSE in 2013 with a degree in biomedical engineering and an emphasis in biomaterials. This is his 8th year participating as a mentor. So thank you both for being here today and sharing your experiences and advice on informational interviews. I'm going to go ahead and stop my screen share and turn it over to Adam and Claire.
Great, thanks. I'm glad you stopped the screen share, because as you can maybe tell, this is that was pre-COVID. This is post-COVID, or during COVID, I guess. So a little different appearance there. But Claire and I are here to share some of our experiences with informational interviews. Obviously, I'm taking it from the mentor's perspective now, but I have also been on the student end of an informational interview, and they can even be when you're in your career. As you decide where to go down the road. And so, from my perspective, really one of the great things about informational interviews is exactly what it sounds like. It's gathering information, right? And they've been used. I've used them in my past for really making big decisions as I go through my career and even my schooling. So when I first started school, I was looking at med school. I was at a college in Moorhead, Minnesota, and I changed my path based on some informational interviews that were set up for a family friend of mine. Set them up for me, and I decided to go engineering. Came down to the University of Minnesota and graduated from the biomedical engineering program. So it really helped me make those decisions, and why I did was. It's just a way to really understand what life will look like after you graduate. If you look at just as an engineer, which is what I'm most familiar with. So sorry if you're in a different discipline, but we'll start with that one because that's my bread and butter here. Is you can go to multiple different areas. There's process development, there's R&D, there's design quality, there's ops quality, there's operations, manufacturing, engineering, and even potentially marketing or things like that. And if you're an engineering student, you probably have no idea what I just said because it's completely foreign when you're in your day-to-day in school as to what that could potentially translate to down the road. And so that's what I see as a huge value, is to see what the day-to-day is going to look like once you graduate and move into your future careers. It's also a great opportunity for networking, especially here in the Twin Cities. The medical device world is a huge and very small at the same time community. You will definitely start your career with somebody who will leave, or you'll leave, and then you'll probably end up with that person again at some point throughout. And so expanding that network early on is a huge benefit to yourself. And then also really exploring company cultures. Every company has a different culture. You're going to hear the buzzword culture 1,000 times throughout your career, and being able to experience that early on and see how different companies act and interact with each other is going to be a huge benefit as you try to navigate your career into the future. So enough talking from me. Claire, what do you think is the main value from your perspective of an informational interview?
Yeah, so I would say it's very similar, where I've mainly used informational interviews to kind of get to know more about what the day-to-day of like a certain job or a career would look like. And for example, if you want to enter into like, I don't know, some career, what does the progression in that career look like, and what opportunities are there later down the line? So for me last year, I kind of had this, it's like the college existential crisis where you're like, what do I do after graduation? And maybe it was a little early, but I was thinking about whether I should go to grad school or maybe just get a job after graduation. And that was kind of the big question, which I then narrowed down to, well, I'm going to get a job eventually. And like, what kind of job would I want, right? Like, what do I value within a job? And that's something that informational interviews really helped answer, because I first got to meet with a lot of really cool people. And I also got to know about a lot of really great opportunities. So I did 5 different informational interviews throughout the year last year in the CSE mentoring program. And basically, just by meeting with these people and asking them about like, their day-to-day kind of careers, like what Adam said, like the company culture and what they enjoy about their work and where they see themselves going, I gained a lot of insight on kind of like how I related to them and what I found most exciting about what they said that they were doing. So yeah, I would say that's the main reason. And then something else is it's not really about getting a job. Like that's not the point of an informational interview, but my current internship was actually something that I never would have, I guess, gotten or even known about without an informational interview. So just along with that exploration, it's being open to new opportunities and just kind of like, I don't know, like meeting different people, asking them about their careers, being curious and staying open to all of that. So yeah, that would definitely be my two biggest reasons. Those would, yeah, be my two biggest reasons for why to do an informational interview.
Yeah, I love that. Ask a lot of questions. We're definitely come back to that, but that's such a big piece of this is collect as much information as you possibly can. So you just said, you know, last year you did five different informational interviews. And it can be pretty daunting to ask basically a stranger for a favor, to give you some of their time to help you learn when it seems like there's really no benefit to them. So what are some lessons that you've learned from doing these informational interviews or from asking them? What advice do you have for people?
I guess like the first thing would just be like be prepared. Like know what you want to learn from meeting with that person. Like for every person I met with, there was maybe something different about them that I was really curious about. Like I met with a service designer who had gone back to grad school twice and had majored in two different disciplines totally unrelated to design. And I was curious about kind of her educational path and how that led to where she is today. Whereas I met with some artificial intelligence researchers, and something I was curious about was just how their work is different from the work they did in academia, since they were in industry doing research. So these are all just kind of different topics that I was curious about and had prepared beforehand, because I knew I want to learn about that. So that's, I guess, the first thing. The second is to have like a concise and professional email. Like I'm sure, Adam, you've encountered this where you either get a really long email or you just don't really understand what they're asking for. So just be upfront and, you're asking a favor, state what you want to learn, what you find exciting about what they do, and then state your availability. Be like, hey, if you're willing to meet, I'm available at these very specific times, so that they can kind of just say yes or no, depending on their availability, and follow up without having them doing the bulk of the scheduling work. So I would say just kind of lead in with all that context and then just take the lead on scheduling, so that you don't have to make them do the work. I don't know. What do you think about like the whole sort of like scheduling over email and all of that, Adam?
Yeah, I think that's perfect. And definitely exactly what you said there is, don't only throw your schedule in, but make sure you have it there after kind of introducing yourself and what you're looking for as well. Because as you guys know, and Andrea and Claire, you guys can attest to this. Our first meeting for prepping for this wasn't on my calendar, and I showed up 15 minutes late because I forgot about it. Like I live by my calendar, it's got to be on there. And if you come in with, hey, I can meet next Friday, and it's not just, I can meet Friday from 1 to 3.
Right.
That's not great. If it's, give a few different times, multiple options. So again, the onus is you've taken that initiative to say, here's when I can meet, pick what works best for you. And if none of them work, suggest something else and we'll see what works from there.
Yeah, yep. And also pre-COVID, I guess because now it would all be video calls, but to make it sound a little less like formal or daunting, something I would say is like, let's meet up for a coffee chat. And that also lets you meet very easily, like in a public place, like a library, a coffee shop, without, and then you can be like, hey, what place works best for you? And suggest maybe like I'm on campus or I can drive out to these places. Just let me know, right? Depending on what fits in your schedule. So that's just a tip for hopefully when things return back in person and you can actually meet up with someone. So yeah, don't just schedule the time, but also take the lead in figuring out where you're going to meet as well. And also something else I want to mention for students is I was really nervous, like reaching out to these people who I like I had no clue who they were, right? And you read all their credentials and they're very impressive. And you're like, I'm so busy, or they're so busy that they probably don't have enough time to meet with me, or it would be kind of a waste of time for them, to meet with me in any sort of sense. And like the thing is, people really like talking about themselves. So as long as you're excited to talk with them, they'll usually be very excited to talk with you. And it's very impressive for someone to reach out and like take that initiative. So as a student, even though you might kind of have that sense of like, oh, like they're the professional and, they're busy, like they wouldn't make time for me. Like that's not really the case. And everyone I met with was so incredibly impressed and excited that someone else wanted to learn more about what they did. So yeah, that's just, I guess, encouragement to not really let the whole like cold emailing part deter you, because I understand like how kind of nerve-wracking that is, but it's still like, yeah, like the worst you can get is like, no, I cannot meet up with you. Like it's nothing that bad.
Exactly.
So yeah.
Yeah, and you're exactly right. I mean, that is showing initiative. It's hard to cold call or email somebody, and so I always appreciate that as well. And one other thing to key off what you had said before, Claire, is well, number one, yeah, we do like talking about ourselves. I'll speak for most engineers that I know. Believe it or not, the introverted lab people doesn't necessarily shine through in one-on-one conversations when we get to talk about ourselves. The other thing is you had mentioned, suggesting a place to meet. I appreciate that. The other thing for mentors as well is if you're looking for somewhere to meet, and this is just something I've experienced over the years as a mentor, ask if your student has a car before you suggest a place to meet, because I'm not going to suggest the Starbucks in Plymouth if you don't have a car. And I know people have done that, and then a student has made it work and taken like 3 buses to get out there when it's like, oh, I was just, I could have driven downtown. It's not a big deal. But instead made this huge ordeal for the student, which is unfortunate. So don't be afraid to ask that as well, just to put it out there. And in the world we're in now, advice I can give is video on. Always video on when you're doing, especially one-on-ones. I appreciate it. I make my coworkers do it occasionally to their disdain sometimes, but it's just, I have that personal connection is such a big thing. And that's mentors, another call out to you. This is what we're here for, is to help create these spaces for our mentees and for other people's mentees. I'll do probably north of 10 informational interviews a year throughout different interns at our company, people's mentees that I know, people I graduated with who are mentors through this program or something else. And also I've, as mentioned before, you don't have to be a student. I go into an informational interview to learn, and have somebody conduct one for me, really, throughout my company now. Multiple different areas across the company, and within, as was mentioned before, I've moved throughout Medtronic to multiple different areas, multiple different disciplines. I'm actually moving into our marketing group here after the first of the year, and all of that has come from learning about what other people do and asking questions. And back, I'd mentioned this before, is asking those questions. When you go into an informational interview, be prepared. First and foremost, is really fill up the time. Like, you're asking for a favor. People don't mind talking about themselves, but if you've asked for somebody for 30 minutes and you come in with 2 questions and you're done 5 minutes in, it's not a good look. It just really isn't. And so, like, prepare for it, have your questions set up, and be curious on that front, and take it professionally. It's not about getting a job. You made that super clear, and I need to reiterate that point, is it is not about getting a job. However, it does not mean that you won't get a job out of it. So I'm in my position now from that informational interview I did back in 2009, to figure out if I wanted to go in engineering or go into med school. And I met with a bunch of people. They liked me. They said, hey, why don't you come back for apply for an internship next year? Sure, yeah, I'll do that. And I did. And I had more internships, and then I got a job full time out of it. And so it's take it seriously when you're in person, dress professionally. Those sort of things are just super important. And so again, it's not the goal. Don't go into it being like, all right, so can you give me an internship or give me a job? But definitely prepare yourself as if you're going into an interview, I think. And that just shows, again, the initiative on the front side for reaching out and suggesting the times, and then the follow through of taking it seriously. And so, moving into that now, follow up.
Yeah.
Right. So Claire, what do you think is the best way to follow up after an informational interview like this?
So I always send like a thank you email at the very least within like that same day, or if it's already like the evening in that day, then the next day during, like business hours, so they can receive in their inbox. So it won't necessarily be like the longest thank you email, but it will be specific to what we talked about in the conversation. And I will at least, mention, this is what I enjoyed, this is what I learned. And like, if they recommended that I talk to someone else, or that I check out some podcast or resource online, or, or anything really that came up in the conversation, I tell them, if I followed up on it, and just so they know that I am taking their suggestions seriously, and that, right, I really valued kind of the conversation and the advice that they gave me. So that's definitely like the most important thing, is like, take that initiative to follow up and send the thank you email. Like I put a reminder on my calendar. Like when I get an informational interview scheduled, what I get on my calendar, and the second thing I do is I immediately the next day put like an event being like, write the thank you note, just so that it cannot slip through the cracks at all. And I guess the second thing would be, depending on like how the conversation went and whether it's someone you would like to keep in touch with in the future, you can definitely ask them in the email, like, hey, is it okay if I add you on LinkedIn? I really enjoyed our conversation. I would love to keep in contact. And that's just a great way to continue like getting to know other people in that field. And like, for example, if it was a book that they told you about, you can reach out to them when you finish the book and, let them know your thoughts. And it kind of becomes this thing where it's not just about like, just, I don't know, like finding a job, but you're like, actually you met someone who's really cool, and in a professional context, you get to learn more from them and they get to learn from you as well. So what do you think about that, Adam? I guess from someone who's both done and given informational interviews.
Yeah, I totally agree. I can tell you right now, I don't respond to every thank you, but I appreciate every single one. So don't get demoralized. It's not that they didn't get it or they, hate you or something like that because they didn't respond. It's probably people are busy. They saw it and they're like, oh, that's awesome. And then I'm going to respond to that later. And they didn't put a reminder in their calendar and it just slipped through the cracks. And when I was a student, especially, I would handwrite notes. Now I don't think that's necessarily as important, because I can tell you I've been into my office 3 times in the last 9 months. So if somebody wrote me a letter and sent it to the office, I wouldn't know. But at least following up virtually with an email is a really good way to close the loop. And when you're, as I mentioned before, as you move into your career and start to do informational interviews within your company with other groups or with senior leadership or things like that, yeah, definitely ask them about, hey, I'm going to follow up with Jeff and Sean. Do you mind if we grab coffee again in 6 months, or a year or 2 months or whatever it is, and just try and keep that relationship going. Because as I said before, you'll definitely run into those people again. For sooner or later, you'll come across them, and again, it certainly can turn into a job offer at that point, or just a really great relationship and somebody that you like keeping in contact with and go mountain biking with. Another example from my life. But yeah, I think really at least just doing the email is a good way to close the loop and show that you really appreciate their time.
Yeah. Speaking of time, I believe that Andrea, since she turned her
think
camera
we're
back
over.
on. Yeah, I think we're over a bit, but that was a perfect ending. Thank you, Adam.
Oh, well, thank you both. That was great. I think that's a lot of really great advice, really practical advice. So we are going to move on to our breakout room discussion. So I'm going to quick share the PowerPoint screen that's got the small group discussion questions. Again, you got this in your email, in your confirmation email. Once we get into the breakout rooms, you will not be able to see this slide anymore. So I would suggest that you open it up now. And if Joelle can share that in the chat, and if not, let me know and I can throw it in there. So for the breakout room, so for our small group discussion, our 3 questions we want to get everyone talking about. Mentors, we want to hear from you. What is your experience giving informational interviews? If you've done that, what makes an informational interview successful? What makes it unsuccessful? If you've helped a student prepare, kind of what advice do you give them? Just get your perspectives on this topic. And then students, we want to hear from you. What are you nervous about? What are your concerns about informational interviews? What makes you hesitate in asking for one? And then finally, I want both mentors and students to brainstorm some sample questions. So mentors, what do you really like to be asked about your job? And students, if you could ask somebody working in a job you're interested in one thing, what's the most important thing you want to ask? What's the one thing you really want to learn? And let's get some questions brainstormed, because that's kind of usually the hardest part with informational interviews, is coming up with those questions to fill that 30 minutes you've asked for. So each breakout room does have a volunteer host who will help guide today's discussion. If you have any questions, you can ask them. They will introduce themselves once everyone's in the breakout room. So what we want to do now is kind of just share what we talked about. So I'm going to ask each of our hosts to start us off with sharing what their room talked about, and then open it up to anyone who wants to share any questions you have for Claire or Adam, or just in general that you want to get some more feedback on. We've got about 10 minutes for this portion, so we'll try to get through as much as we can. I want to just remind you all again about that guide that I shared in the confirmation email that will go out in the follow-up email as well. That's a great place to start. It's got lots of sample questions and ideas to get you started. So let's start with Steve. Stephen Savitt, your room. What did you guys talk about?
Okay, so the things that stuck in my mind is there's kind of a common theme among the 3 students who were present, that they feared rejection or maybe not having good resonance with the interviewer. And so we talked a lot about how you move beyond that, and you just kind of, if things don't go well in a given interview, you don't shut down and not want that next interview, you just keep rolling.
That's great. Anyone else from Steve's room wanted to share anything that they felt resonated with them during the conversation? All right, then we'll move on and ask Mary Kurth, what about your room?
Thank you. And I guess I will move to some of the student, why is the student nervous? And some of our questions or some of the comments were really afraid of running out of questions. And how do I ask questions, and what is the right platform in which to set up the interview? And so we talked a bit about that first informational interview, limit it to 30 minutes, because 30 minutes will just zip by, and to ask the person that you are interviewing about their job. And because everybody likes to, as we talked previously, everybody likes to talk about their job. And then we talked a little bit about what is the right platform, and we talked about probably either email or LinkedIn is a good way to connect with people for an informational interview. And it is important to always be inquisitive, have questions prepared, and to do research. And to do research on the company itself is the most important piece, but also do research on the individual, which you can normally get that information on LinkedIn.
Right,
And
that's great.
I would welcome the rest of our group if there's anything else you want to add.
Yeah. Anybody else? All right. What about Denny? What about your group?
Yeah, I'll try to hit the high points. Our group had some really wide-ranging conversation. I'll let them chime in, but a couple things stood out. I thought be curious and try to gather as much information as you can. Don't let non-responsiveness when you're reaching out to the mentor, don't take that personally. You know, just stay with it. It's not awful. There could be some rejection feeling there. Don't take it personally. We talked a little bit about cold calling, and there was a wise observation about, you know, if you're asked to cold call, that isn't, it used to be a phone call. Now LinkedIn is much more of an effective tool to make the connection. So I thought that was interesting. Another high point I thought in our discussion is when the student is asking, what do you like about your job? Ask them what they don't like, because no professional has a perfect job. At least I don't think there is one. So don't be afraid to ask that. And then maybe one other high point is that the more informational interviews you actually do, you fill in perspectives, because no one mentor has all the perspective, and you get different cultures. So those are some high points, but the rest of the group, any observations you want to share?
All right, let's move on to Jesse. What did you guys talk about?
So the first part of the discussion was a lot about how to prepare for informational interviews. We talked about the advantage of doing a lot of background research, understanding what's already public information about the company, so that you know what things am I going to be able to find out from this interview that I wouldn't be able to find otherwise. And then we also got into some other ways besides just through your mentor to find people for the informational interviews. We talked about career fairs, resume building workshops, you know, various events where there's a speaker going up to them afterwards and thanking them and asking if they'd be free to talk another time. Online, we talked about, you know, one strategy, if you don't want to have to make the cold call, if you can find a mutual connection, for example, on LinkedIn, between yourself and the person you want to talk to, you can ask that mutual connection to introduce you to the other person. And if there's anything else from anyone else in my room, they can feel free.
Yeah, that's all great. All right, anything else anyone wants to share from Jesse's room? Good. All right, so my room, I think the stuff that hasn't already been mentioned that stuck out to me, that you're most successful in an informational interview when you're just honest, when you're yourself, when you're genuine, that really comes across. And so just to be yourself in those situations. We talked about researching first as well, not being afraid to ask. The worst they can do is say no, right? You can reach out and they can say no, and then you move on to the next person. And talk a little bit about feeling not experienced enough, right? If you're only a sophomore and you really have no work experience in the field, know that that can be very daunting. And so there we talked a little bit about how an informational interview is a lot more about the other person than it is about you. So unlike a traditional interview, you're not really expected to be able to share a lot about your experience. You'll share some, but you don't have to have stories about how you handled certain things or how you, you know, it can really be focused on the other person answering your questions about their experience. And Joelle did just put in the Maroon and Gold Network, which we talked about in our room too. The Maroon and Gold Network is the university's exclusive networking platform. It's like LinkedIn, but just for University of Minnesota students, alumni, and friends of the university. And it is a great place to find people for informational interviews. Everybody on that platform has already raised their hand and said, I am here, I am willing to meet with students. So that's a great place to start. Obviously, your mentor is a great place to start. And I just want to also plug the CSE Mentor Program LinkedIn group, which is another great place to find other mentors. So all of our mentors are, you know, they're part of this program because they want to help students. And you can always reach out to any of them and say, you know, if you're looking for other civil engineer mentors or other ISYE mentors or whatever, and ask them if they're willing to do a call with you or meet with you as well. So we've got a couple of minutes left. Is there any questions or anything anyone wants to bring up and talk about kind of as the larger group? Anything you're still wondering about, or any advice mentors want to share? Anybody? Everybody got everything out during the small group discussions?
Well,
They're all
Andrea,
good?
this is Denny.
Yeah.
We had an interesting example Adam brought up in our group about he was on a plane and he struck up a conversation with the person on the plane, and it ended up being a semi-informational interview. So your curiosity can be in the most informal ways too, just by striking up conversations with people.
Absolutely.
I thought that was great.
Yeah, one of our mentors, Dean talked about doing kind of less formal, technically kind of still informational interviews. He wasn't calling them that. I would still probably call them that, but less formal with people at his workplace. So people that are, you know, further up the chain or in other areas in the workplace. So definitely informational interviews are not something that you only do with students, and they can be as formal as reaching out to a stranger and as informal as talking to a family friend or doing a job shadow with another mentor. So, and like, I can't now remember who said it, but really just, I think Denny, you said it, that the more you do, the more you're going to learn. And so doing as many as you can. Claire did 5 last year, and I think that's great. I could say everybody try to do 4 or 5 a year, just meet with different people, learn about different things. All right, I think we're basically just got out of time.
Add one other thing,
Absolutely,
Andrea.
Joelle.
This is Joelle, Director of Alumni Relations. And I don't think anyone said this before, but informational interviews don't just have to be with professionals. If there's a student who is more senior than you, who had an internship at a company that you'd like to have an internship at, you can talk to them, and technically that's an informational interview, though it will feel a lot more casual because you're talking with another student. So if you're a student who's new to this process and the thought of reaching out to a professional as your first go around sounds scary, see if there's students in the student organizations that you're part of that might be willing to sit down and talk to you about their internship experiences or something, both as a way to practice, but also to get more information that will hopefully be useful to you down the line.
Yes, that's a great. I'd also say faculty and TAs, also people that you can ask, for especially if you're interested in academia moving forward, they're there to help as well. So that's a great place to start. Okay. Yeah, Mariana.
Oh yeah, thanks for noticing me.
Sure.
I just want to emphasize that Claire and Adam did an awesome job. I had a bullet point list, and they kept checking them off, and I'm like, oh, nothing I'm going to say is unique. They did a phenomenal job. So I just wanted to emphasize that.
Oh, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Great.
Thank you. Yes. It helps me. You can emphasize it because it helps me backed up, and it helps me believe that I actually added some value here. So
yeah, I sat down, wrote this down one night. So
no, that's great. Yes. All right. So I'm gonna quickly share my screen and go through just the last couple of things. Get you all out of here in the next minute or so. So again, this was recorded. We will trim the recording so that the middle breakout sessions where there's nothing recorded, we'll share that with you along again with that informational interview guide we put together. It will all be up on our website. All of our events have been recorded, and you can go back and watch. If your mentor or student wasn't able to join you today, you can watch the recording, or you can go through the breakout room questions with them at your next meeting. I do want to make sure you're all saving the date for Monday, January 25th, our mid-year event. A conversation about diversity in STEM with CSE former mentee and alumna Jen Arstad. That will be on Zoom, and it's going to be a great conversation, and we really hope you're all able to make it. And then we are planning our spring monthly pairs events right now, and we want your ideas. So if there are topics, discussion topics, or things you would like to either, stuff you have expertise in, you'd like to share with other mentor pairs, or things you would really like to learn about, please let us know, because we obviously want these to be valuable to you. So if you've got ideas, please let us know. And then again, if anything comes up throughout the year, if you have any questions or concerns, you can always reach out to myself or Joelle. We are here to help you. That is our entire reason we are doing all of this. So I think that's it. Thank you all so much. And again, thank you, Claire and Adam. You guys were rock stars. We are so excited to be able to showcase students and mentors in this program who are doing such great things and like to share your advice with others. So again, thank you all and have a great night.